As Scott McNealy, CEO of Sun Microsystems, has stated, the stakes are too high not to fix public education. We risk our competitive position in the world if we don't. And so it's clear in America that the antiquated educational system is failing. The problem is what to do about it. As the affirmative voice in this policy debate, our contention is that school vouchers are a simple and effective answer to the failing status quo of public education. In other words, school vouchers are good. I'd like to make three arguments. First off, school vouchers save money. Secondly, it's known that school vouchers work in the form of choice. And three, school vouchers lessen racial and socioeconomic disparities. Now, the first point, school voucher programs save the public educational system money. Now, in a few moments, you may hear from the negative as one of their primary arguments that school voucher programs are economically destroying the public education system. That simply couldn't be further from the truth. As Barton Hinkle, a columnist for the Richmond Times-Dispatch, wrote in 2015, voucher programs leave schools with more money. Do the math. Most vouchers offer less than the student's per pupil expenditure. For example, if 10 students each leave a school with an 80% voucher, accounting for 80% of the expenditure, then a school has 10 fewer students but loses only 8 students worth of funding, a net gain of 2 for the school. Meanwhile, the state's only spending 80% of what it otherwise would have on the voucher students. And according to Alexander Hudson's article in 2016, vouchers in many states offer even greater savings. For instance, Indiana's voucher is $3,867. That's only 40% of the public per student spending. The highest cited in the article is Milwaukee at $7,366. And still, that's only 67% of the public per school spending, student per school spending. So yeah, maybe this math doesn't work out if all the students were to go to private school. But according to the National Conference of State Legislature, that never happens. So, while I'm talking about students going to private school, let's talk about another fact after I paint you a picture. If private schools are so bad and the education students receive is so terrible in them, then why do public schools teachers send their own students to private schools at a significantly greater rate than the general public? According to a survey conducted in 2015 by Knowledge Networks, a survey of approximately 4,000 adults, more than 20% of those surveyed were teachers, and they had sent at least one of their children to a non-traditional option for their education, that being private school, a charter school, or homeschooling. Now, for the general public in the study, it was only 13% that sent their children to an educational option that was not a public school. So teachers are in the know when it comes to the quality of the education being delivered. As this is the case, why do they not believe in the quality of the product they're producing? As an analogy, if you work in a factory, which public schools are, and you're producing an inferior product, would you buy that product for yourself? What are the actions of teachers telling us about what they are producing when they use vouchers for their very own children at a greater rate than the general population? Now, how can the biggest leader of this opposition to vouchers, Senator Al Franken, a Democrat from Minnesota, who said in 2017 at the hearings for now Education Secretary Betsy DeVos that she was fundamentally unqualified to lead the Education Department and she was dangerously unqualified over the issues of vouchers and school choice. How can he really oppose her and oppose school choice when he sends his own children to the Dalton School, whose tuition, by the way, is greater than the average salary for a Louisiana school teacher? How can he really argue those points, especially considering the fact that he himself went to a charter school? So school vouchers save money, and school vouchers are utilized by those who know education the best. Now let's talk about one other critically important point. They help lessen economic and racial disparities. As far back as 2000, the Hoover Institute has published data suggesting that this was the case, expecting to find that vouchers, when offered wholesale to an entire community, as was done in Edgewood, Texas, they would skim the best students in the community from the public education system, and those would be going to private school on these vouchers. They found that, in fact, no skimming actually occurred. The Iowa test scores as well for these students were fairly similar. For instance, the Iowa test for basic skills for math, the national median score is a 50 percentile. For the students who utilize vouchers to go to these private schools, they scored a 37%. For those that remain in the public education system, they scored a 35%. Now, for reading scores, those that utilize vouchers scored a 35%, while those in the public education system scored a 28% difference. Now, that's significant, but it's not a relevant finding as indicated by the Hoover Institute. And yet, 23% of those voucher students who were enrolled in programs for gifted students, as compared to 29% of the students who stayed in the public schools, were enrolled in gifted programs. So, kind of a wash all in all. And when you look at the socioeconomic factors, they're fairly similar as well. The average household income between the two groups was $16,000. Ethnicity, 96% Latino in both groups. Residential stability was similar. Suspension rates for both groups of children, whether they took a voucher and went to a private school or remained in the public education system, was identical at 5%. So so students that left and went to the private schools were not kicked out, as maybe one of the arguments posed by the negative, that the students are going to be kicked out of these schools more often. They're going to be cherry picked. That's just not going to be the case. Now, furthermore, Jay Green, a University of Texas professor, looked at integration in private schools on a national basis, and he compared public schools with those private schools, and he found that the private schools are more integrated by at least 7 percentage points, according to data from the U.S. Department of Education. So, school vouchers save the U.S. educational system money if it's known that choice works, and it's been demonstrated by nearly every economically developed country in the world. How can we not, as a country, utilize vouchers as a proven method to save our educational system? The negative will present their case, but don't be fooled by their chicanery. The evidence exists for vouchers. It's been proven that vouchers are an effective tool to improve education, and they also repair social and economic disparities. Let the negative arguments not be full of hypocrisy like Senator Al Franken and rail against the program of vouchers when it in fact works. Because in essence, all they're trying to do is protect their own interests, in this case, their jobs. I appeal to the panel to adopt the proposition and make vouchers a reality for our children.